Because you clicked on this video, I have to ask, do you want to live your entire life without making your own video game? If you're anything like I was, perhaps you spend a little too much time considering game making than actually game making. Or maybe you've started a few games and never quite finished them, and you're now the groundskeeper for your game project graveyard. Either way, I'm not going to let you waste another minute of your life. You're taking action now, and before this video ends, you will have your very own game that is published online, playable from desktop and mobile, won't require user downloads, free to develop, and can later be monetized if you wish. Not bad for a first step into the world of game dev. During this session, I'm going to guide you through a hands-on thought exercise as we navigate 10 pillars every game dev should be aware of. This will not only be theory, you're going to cement these concepts as you put them into practice with me. Let me know in the comments if you get all 10. Let's get started. Pillar number 1, choose the right tool for the job. At entry level, select user-friendly game development engines and software. Please do not get caught up in the religious warfare between which engine is best. These are only tools, and you're welcome to try them all. What's most important is determining what your game development goals are, and then selecting a tool that will help you to meet those goals. This is different for everybody. Since we're making an early level game, and we want it to meet the criteria we already described, we're going to go ahead and pick up GDevelop 5 off the shelf and give it a whirl. You're welcome to put it back on the shelf once we're done. By the way, what is your favorite engine? Let me know in the comments. Having selected GDevelop 5 for the job, open it up in your browser or download it. Either way, it's totally free. You'll notice there are many game templates and AI options to help you get started, but since I'm here to guide you, we're going to raw dog this game and start from scratch. But if you're really interested in taking the AI starter approach, feel free to check out my other tutorial. This next step is super important and will make or break your game from the very beginning. You need to decide what type of game you're going to make. Now this will include pillars number 2 and 3. Pillar number 2, start small. This refers to the amount of gameplay, the number of levels, scope of the in-game world. A smaller project is more manageable, and you are far more likely to succeed on completing it. And similarly, pillar number 3. Simple mechanics and design are easier to manage but can still yield a really fun game. Avoid complex technical features like highly accurate physics systems or procedurally generated endless worlds until you really hone in on your foundational skills. The goal isn't complexity yet, the goal is completion of a published game. Now we're going to create a 2D Flappy Bird style game which is simple enough that we can complete it in one single video, and then you can feel free to add complexity to it later, or even move on to game number 2 and add this one to your portfolio. Moving on, pillar number 4, plan and prototype. Rather than maintain a formal game development document like a large studio might, I prefer to jot down a few notes about what to expect and then do the prototyping in the game engine itself. Do you have a different approach to planning and prototyping, or do you use a game development document? Let me know in the comments. So how will you get the assets, all of the things that you see and hear in the game? Well, don't worry. All of the sprites and music are right here in GDevelop's free asset store, so check that off the list. And while sound effects are also available in the asset store, I'm going to be using my own homegrown sound effects, which I've made available to you for free on my Patreon page, link below. Okay, let's start building. Within GDevelop, go to Build, select Create a Project. In this case, since we're making the game available on desktop and mobile, let's go with a mobile portrait, which is the vertical 720 by 1280. Give it a name. I prefer to store it on the GDevelop cloud. Ignore the AI prompt for now. No need to optimize for pixel art. Do allow players to authenticate in-game, and create project. As discussed, we're starting with a completely blank template, so here we are. First, let's go ahead and select the background by clicking on this white area. Down below under Layers, if it's not already open, select your layers up here on the top right, and then find this little color panel, click into it, and let's make this a nice sky color, or any color you prefer really. Now to give you an idea of the style I'm going for, I'm going to use simple 2D sprites. They're relatively friendly looking, but the world is going to be a little bit dangerous, with a bit of spikes and lava. But if you prefer to use something more friendly like jelly beans or cotton candy, you can feel free to add those assets in for yourself. Second, let's add another layer. We're going to need it for UI objects. Rename the layer by clicking Layer and typing UI. Next, let's start with the player object. Click on Add New Object, click on Sprite, select Add an Animation. Now we'll want to replace this default image with something from the asset store. Click Add Animation, then click the drop-down arrow, choose from Asset Store. In this case, I'm going to search dog_jump. Now we're going to animate the player object, so start by selecting the first number in the sequence, and then continue to add from the asset store number 2, 3, and so on. Up here by the clock, set the frame rate to 0.05. Make sure that loop is not selected and hit preview. Now every time you jump, it will do this. Change the object name to dog. Change the animation name to jump. Apply. Drag the dog into the middle of the scene. Now double click on the dog object, go to behaviors, add a behavior, and we need a couple of things here. First, select face forward. Add a behavior again. Next, select platformer object, which will actually show up as platformer character. To configure these behaviors, under face forward, leave the default values of 0. For the platformer object, set gravity to 800, max falling speed to 600, jump speed to 600, and jump sustain time as 0.2. And you can leave all of these other settings to their default values. Apply. To preview the scene, click on the play button at the top, or select F6. And if you preview the scene, you'll notice that the dog just falls from the top to the bottom. That's because we've applied physics behavior, but there's nothing to stop him from falling due to gravity. Go into your scene events for the no-code portion of the engine by clicking the tab at the top. At the beginning of the scene, for now, let's delete display authentication banner. Click add a new event. On the side of that event line, right-click and select Add Comment. Type Gameplay. Now the way this is laid out, the conditions are your if statements and the actions are your then statements. So if condition, then action. Add condition, type timescale. Now we're going to test if the timescale is equal to 1. 1 is normal time. Then right-click on that row and select Add Sub-Event, or Shift-D. Add a new comment here, type Unconditional Updates. This means we're going to have no conditions beyond the parent condition of the timescale being 1. And then add action, click on dog, type Simulate, right key press. Hit OK. Add action, dog, and then under the platformer state, allow jumping again. Otherwise, your dog will fall to his doom. Now, if you preview the scene, you'll notice that your dog is now jumping and is moving to the right. But if he continues to move, he goes off screen. So what we need to do to fix that is set the camera to follow the dog. Add another action, type camera, and select camera center X position is equal to, type dog, and the dog object should pop up. Click on that, and then type with a capital C, center X, with closed parentheses at the end. This is going to position the camera at the center of your dog and follow it. Camera number can be default. Let's test. Now the scene will continue to follow your dog as he jumps and moves to the right. This would be a good time to hit save, so type Ctrl S or manually save by going up to File on the top left. Now that we have the dog in the scene and the camera is tracking, we need to go ahead and add some more environmental material. Add new object. In this case, do a tiled sprite, choose a file, from the asset store, search cloud, select tiled cloud layer 1, let's set the default width to 720 and the default height to 100. Rename the object, cloud near, and before we do anything else, click on Edit with Piskel, or Piskel. Now this is the pixel editor inside of the game engine. Over on the right side under Transform, hold Alt and click. This will flip it along the horizontal axis. Click Save. Hit Apply. Again, add new object, tiled sprite, choose File from Asset Store. In this case, select Cloud Layer 2. And let's do the same exact things. Let's name it Cloud underscore far, default width 720, height 100, and edit that. Alt, click to flip, save, and apply. Drag the cloud far onto the top left of your scene. You'll notice where the camera window is because there will be a little border. Put your cloud just to the outside of that border, drag the edges, and since this is a tiled sprite, it's going to continue to repeat the image rather than stretch it. Drag the bottom of it just so that the end of the cloud is visible, but it does not start a new cloud repetition. Drag cloud near to the same location, And if you need to, right-click on it and bring to front. That way you can manage it. Do the exact same thing. Stretch it down and over. If you need to move it further up, that's fine. Now we're going to add some parallax behavior to the clouds. So double-click on Cloud Near, Behaviors, Add Behavior, type Pair, and select Horizontal Parallax for a tiled sprite. Apply. Do the same thing for Cloud Far. Click, Behaviors, Add Behavior, Horizontal Parallax, and set that number to 0.6. Apply. Preview. Now we see that we have clouds up at the top of the scene. Feel free to modify and tweak these to your liking. It doesn't have to exactly match mine. In fact, you can use any tiled sprite and mimic this behavior. You could use dungeon walls if you like. Good time to save your progress. Enter the events, and at the beginning of the scene, I'm going to change the color of those clouds because I want dark clouds. You can pick whichever color you prefer depending on your style of game. Select Cloud Near, search Tint, Color, and then you can type in your RGB values here, or you can click on the color panel. In this case, I'm going to select a gray color and hit OK. And then I'm going to click on that action, hit Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V to copy it. And then I'm going to change from Cloud Near, back that out, and select Cloud Far. And I'm going to change the color to a slightly lighter color and hit OK. Now we have different clouds with different colors. You may notice that during this tutorial, I've expanded my window from the standard 720 by 1280 frame to a full screen, and that's okay. If you want to make sure that you have the right resolution, up on the top left, select the three panels, go to Properties, and you'll see your resolution right here. You can change that anytime, but I've selected Change Width to fit the screen or window size. The end product is still going to be 720 by 1280. Next, we're going to add some ground effects. Next, we're going to add some assets for the ground area, which leads us to our pillar number 5. Pillar number 5 is to use available resources. Now, being a solo dev is often used as a clout definition, and that's okay, but most people aren't experts in all of the various skill sets. So if you don't have your own team, consider working asynchronously with other talented people. There are many artists out there who would love to see their art incorporated into someone else's game. So explore the options and give credit or payment where due. This is a win-win situation for everybody. And in this case, of course, we're using those assets that were donated to the GDevelop asset store. So click on Add New Object, Tiled Sprite, search Tiled Summer, and select that asset. Then rename it to Lava Near. Change the default width to 720, the height to 100, and apply. Then add new object, Tiled Sprite, choose File from Asset Store. In this case, change it from summer to winter, and select that sprite. Name it Lava Far. Set the default width to 720. Set the default height to 50. Apply. Drag Lava Far to the bottom of the scene. Make sure that it covers all of the edges. Do the same thing with Lava Near. Place that one slightly below the other lava, slightly overlapping. And again, we're going to add a behavior to these. So click on Lava Near, Behaviors, Add Behavior, Horizontal Parallax. Type 0.6 and apply. Lava Far, Behaviors, Add Behavior, Horizontal Parallax, and set this to 0.5. Now we have clouds parallaxing at the top and water at the bottom. But why did we call it lava? I'll show you why. Go to Scene Events, and at the top at the beginning of the scene, copy and paste a Change Tint action and replace the cloud to Lava Near. And I'm going to set that to a red color. Copy and paste that. And I'm going to change the Lava Far to another red color. Again, pick whichever colors or tiled sprites you prefer. Now that it's red, we can sort of pretend that it's lava instead of water. How can we make it even more lava-like? Next, we're going to need to add some barriers so that the dog actually has something to dodge. Add new object, tiled sprite, choose file from asset store, and I'm going to choose one of these spikehead idle sprites. Change the name to barrier, set the default width to 105, change the default height to 1290, apply. Now if we drag that out into the scene, it looks like this. Now the idea will be to automatically spawn these, one on the top and one on the bottom, like so. However, you'll notice if we actually play the game, it goes past us and then there are no more. And if you've seen any other tutorials on how to make a Flappy Bird game, you know that we can't manually place these. We need them to generate infinitely. So how can we do that? First, let's add a behavior to the barrier so that once they depart from the scene, they automatically destroy themselves and don't eat up any more of our memory. So under behaviors, select destroy outside of screen, and let's give it a nice safe margin of 1000. Now we need to make sure that the player object, the dog, is able to jump. Now by default, the spacebar will allow you to jump using the platformer behavior, but we want to add a few more controls. So over here on the left, under unconditional updates, select add new event below, or Shift A, and add a comment to this one as well, jumping. Under add condition, search or, click on that and add. This will give you a check for if one of these conditions is true. Under add a subcondition, type key pressed, and in this case I'm going to choose if the spacebar is pressed. You can choose whichever button you prefer. I'm also going to add a subcondition, mouse button pressed or touch held. For the mouse button I'm going to choose left and apply. Now if on desktop either the space key or the left mouse button is down, the dog will jump, or if on mobile or touch screen, it will jump on a touch. Also, outside of the subconditions, add a new condition and type once. Trigger once while true and hit OK. This will ensure that it only jumps one time per frame while the condition is true. Under add action, type simulate, jump key press for the dog and hit OK. Let's change the animation, dog, type animation, select animation by name, and choose jump. If your animation was not named, it might be animation number 0. We're going to change the animation frame of the dog, so once again go to dog, animation, current frame, set to 0, and preview. Now I can click into the scene and the dog jumps, or I can continue to use the spacebar and he still jumps. Save. Now we need to add the barriers into the game automatically. So below jumping, add new event, and add a comment. This will be for spawn items. Below spawn items, I want you to navigate to the top right, click on the plus, and click on repeat. Select repeat 3 times. Now we need to add some conditions under spawn items. For this part, we need to add some extensions. So go to the top left, find extensions, click on the plus, and type repeat. Select repeat every X seconds. Now going back to the previous pillar, this is another example of why, as a solo dev, you're really standing on the shoulders of giants, and there's no point in reinventing the wheel yourself. Here you can see all of the GDevelop members who have added contributions to GDevelop. Install and project. Then, down below spawn items, click add condition, repeat with the scene timer, name it create barriers, set the duration to every 3 seconds, and hit OK. In order to move forward, we actually need to add a few global variables. So move back up to the top left again. Under Project Settings, click on Global Variables. And here we're going to add next barrier y as a number and leave it at 0. Then add another variable, next barrier x, also as a number. Now let's set this one to 820. These two variables are going to be the location of the next barrier objects spawned in the game, with 820 being off to the right side of the screen just outside of view. Remember, our scene width is 720. If you're using a scene width that's wider than this, be sure to set this outside of whichever screen you're using. While we're here, let's go ahead and add a couple other variables which we know we'll want in the game. First, add one called score, leave it at default as a number, add a variable named high score, also as a number, and add a variable called coin score. Finally, add a variable called barrier gap. Set this to 250. Apply. Back within our events, under spawn items, add action, type global variable, change variable value, and we're going to change the variable next barrier x, set that to camera border right, and it should pop up as an option. Leave the parentheses blank and add 100. Now I'm going to copy and paste that, but I'm going to change the second one to next barrier y. And I'm going to change the value. I'm going to set it to random in range, camera border top, camera border bottom. That tells us that this number is going to be a random number ranging from the top of the camera to the bottom of the camera. On the left, right-click and add sub-event, or Shift-D, add action, click on barrier, create an object, hit OK. Now I want you to set the X position to next barrier X, set the Y value to next barrier Y minus 1280 minus barrier gap divided by 2. The reason for this is we're setting the Y coordinate to somewhere within the visible Y coordinates, and we're subtracting the height of the sprite object Now I'm going to select this action and copy and paste it. I'm going to leave next barrier X as the X coordinate, and then I'm going to change the Y coordinate to next barrier Y plus barrier gap divided by 2. Now you can see that we have columns spawning from the right, and they're moving toward the left with a gap in between the top and the bottom columns. Obviously we can move right through the columns without dying because we haven't told it to hurt the dog yet. But don't worry, no animals will be harmed in the making of this game. Keep in mind that you have the freedom to manipulate any of these items as you prefer, which leads us to pillar number 6, which is to iterate and improve. Game development is an iterative process, so continually test your work, gather feedback, and make improvements as you go along. Iteration is where the prototyping from before is turned into mature processes. Now, one concept for scoring in this game is to add score for the longer you survive. The longer you survive, the higher score you get. So let's add that to the game. Add new object, text. Let's call this text score. Set the size to 70. Click on the color box, set to white, bold. You can leave the font as default, and in the initial text to display, type score, space. I'm going to enable the outline and the shadow, and apply. Next, duplicate that text score and name it text high score. Open that up and change the text to display to high score. Apply. Drag text high score onto the scene to the top right area and drag the score below it. Now when you preview this, you'll notice that they move off to the right. This is because we haven't added it to the UI layer. So to add it to the UI layer, go back to the scene, select high score, and then on the left where it says base layer, click the drop down and click UI. Do the same for score. Now when you preview it, they will stay on the screen and travel along with you. Now we need to set the scores to reflect actual numbers. To do this, under unconditional updates, we're going to add an action, and we're going to modify the text object. So select text score, text, set to, then type in quotations, score, space, plus the global variable score, and apply. Now when we test this, you'll see that it is now reflecting the number 0, which is the default value that we've assigned to score. However, the score is not changing. To change the score, we need to select the global variable, change variable value, score, and assign that dog.x divided by 10 plus coin score. You'll notice that you're getting a really large trailing number. This is because it has a floating decimal, and we actually did not round the number. To correct this, go back to the text object, not the global variable, and within its assignment by score, we need to wrap it inside of a round function. Where it says within quotations score, and then plus, type to string, parenthesis, round, parenthesis, and then close the whole thing in 2 parentheses. So now it will round the score and output to string and add it to the text object. Now when we run this, we get a nice clean whole number. We're going to do the same thing for the high score. At the beginning of the scene, the score does not reflect any number at all. So let's add to the beginning of the scene by copying the change variable score and pasting it up top. Now we're going to want to reset the score every game, so set it to 0. Similarly, copy and paste that once, and we also want to change the coin score to 0 for later on. Now let's change the text of the high score by copy and pasting this text event up top. Change the text of high score and set this to quotations, high score, plus to string, round, high score. Remember to close it into parentheses. We now have an updating score and a placeholder high score of 0. Now for my game design, I've decided I would like a little more variety to the score by adding objects that I can pick up that will give me score, in addition to the score obtained by how long I survive. So think about what you would like to add into your game to accomplish this. For me, I'm going to choose Add New Object, Sprite, Add Animation, Add from Asset Store. I'm going to select Coin, and I'm going to pick each sprite for the animation. So bronze 1 through 8. And I'm going to name this Coin, but I want there to be 3 different versions of the coin, and I'll show you how to do that with a single object. Name this one Bronze, then add another animation. Select from Asset Store, and this time we're going to pick the silver coins. Name that one Silver. Finally, add another animation, and you guessed it, select the gold coins. Name that one Gold. And then by the clock for each animation, change the time to 0.11, or whichever animation speed you think looks best. Click on Loop and apply. Now back in the events, under Spawn Items, we're going to add an event under the Repeat Every 3 Seconds event, but we're going to add a Repeat event from the top right here. Repeat 3 times, and for these 3 times, we're going to create the object of the coin. We're going to create this at X position camera border right plus coin.width plus random in range. The range will be -100, 100. That'll add a little bit of variety. The Y position, we're going to set that to somewhere in the middle of the scene at random in range, -300, 300. Okay. Here we're going to add some randomization to the types of coin that spawn. So we need to add a global variable. Go to the top left, Project Settings, Global Variables, add coin type, leave it as a number, and apply. And then here in the event, under Actions, we're going to change the global variable, coin type, and we're going to assign it random in range, 0 to 20. Then add a sub-event. Now we're going to check that global variable. If the global variable coin type is less than or equal to 12, then we're going to select the coin and set the animation by name to bronze. Okay. Now copy and paste that event down below. Here we're going to check if the variable of the coin type is greater than 12, and then copy and paste this condition and change it to the variable coin type is less than or equal to 19. And in this case, move over to the right and change bronze to silver, and then paste the event again down below, and this of course will be for the gold coin. The only remaining number here is going to be 20, so check to see if the variable is equal to 20. It will be the most rare. Change it to gold. Now we see that we have barriers spawning, and every time the barrier spawns we get about 3 coins. However, some of the coins are spawning too far up, so we're going to change the randomization for the Y coordinate. To correct the Y coordinate of the coin placement, go back into this event here where we create the coins, and change the Y value to random in range, camera border top, parentheses, plus 100, comma, camera border bottom, parentheses, minus 100. This will place them more squarely within the center of the frame. Of course, we're not able to do anything with them yet, so let's change that. Down below, we're going to add for each object, and drag this to the left so that it is a child of the timescale scene condition. Repeat for each instance of coin, add condition, click on coin, type collision. If the coin is in collision with the barrier, we want to make sure that it's not stuck inside the barrier, so we're just going to bump it to the left a little bit. So we will click on the coin again, type position, x position is equal to the coin.x coordinate minus 100. Now we have additional checks that we need to do under the repeat for each instance of coin. So to save processing power, we're going to add some sub-events, and I need to drag the previous condition in action down below into the sub-event. and create additional sub-events for the repeat action. In the next sub-event, select coin, type distance between two objects, and then select dog. If the distance is equal to coin.width, okay. First, click on coin and type delete. This will remove the coin, and then add another sub-event. Now we want to check which coin we're collecting. Click on coin, animation by name. If it is equal to bronze, then we're going to change the global variable coin score. And let's add, let's say 50 points. But this is totally up to you. Now I'm going to copy and paste that event, and I'm going to change it to silver, and I'm going to change the score to something higher than 50, say 100. And again, copy and paste, change it from silver to gold, and change the value to 250. Since these are spawning only once out of every 20, it should have a pretty high value. Now we can see that the dog, when it collides with a coin, is removing them. And if you look closely, you can see that the score, while it's increasing based on movement, it's also increasing based on coin collection. Next, we need to make sure that our barriers actually damage the dog so that the game has a challenge. Scroll up to the event where it says the time scale of the scene is equal to 1, add sub-event, then scroll to the bottom. Here you're going to check if one of these conditions is true. Type OR, then add some sub-conditions. The first sub-condition is going to be if the dog is in collision with the barrier. Hit OK. Now we also want to make sure that the dog is not able to move too high above or below the scene. Remember, we have the lava and the dark gray clouds up above. So let's check the Y position of the dog as well. If the dog Y position is greater than camera border bottom plus dog.height divided by 2, and then copy and paste that and change this value to less than camera border top minus dog.height. The reason we're adding the dog height is to give just a little bit of margin so that the dog does not immediately die the moment it crosses the border, but has a little bit of leeway. Now, if any of these are true, we want to pause the scene by going to Add Action, type Time Scale, and set the time scale to 0. This will stop all movements. Let's test. First, we'll test the collision with the barrier. It successfully stopped the game, but as you can see, there's a little bit of a gap here. So to correct that, we need to change the collision mask on the dog object. Go back out to the scene, double-click on dog, edit collision masks. If you need to, select Use Custom Collision Mask on the right, and we're going to shrink this down. Now this is one of those game development decisions you're going to have to make. So in this case, we're sacrificing a little bit of realism to make the game look and feel smoother. We don't want it to be so small that you have an unfair advantage in dodging the obstacles, but if you shrink it too much, you'll have a disadvantage in collecting coins. So there's a trade-off. Also, it can appear to have air gaps, as we just witnessed. You can fine-tune the coordinates over here on the right. When you're done, click Close and Apply, and test. There we go. Now the dog looks like it's actually colliding with the spiky objects. Next, we need to update the high score whenever the dog dies. So at the bottom, add sub-event, go to Global Variable, Score. If the score is greater than high score, then we want to update the high score to match the score. So change Global Variable, high score set to score. To display this, we need to update the text of the high score. So let's copy this from the top, where it says change the text of high score, and copy and paste that down below. Now when the dog dies, the score, if it's greater than the high score, will be saved as the high score. And since the beginning score was 0, 2210 is certainly higher. Next, we need to add some buttons to the UI to allow some player functionality, such as a pause button and a play again button. But as you can see, we're starting to expand our events list here, which leads us into our next pillar, which is organization. It's important as you code or develop, in this case with events, to keep everything nice and neat so that you or your team can easily navigate around and find what you're working on when and where you need it. So here within the events, you can do this using comments if you're in GDevelop. And over here in the scene objects, You can even sort and group these objects accordingly. You can use groups by opening the group panel here. You can add new groups at the bottom. In this case, if I wanted to add all text objects, I would simply add each object into the group by typing the name. In this way, you can apply events to entire groups rather than individual items. The next pillar is to make sure that the game is as fun as possible. While that may sound obvious, you generally do this by making sure that the mechanics are correct, so that underneath the hood, everything is working properly and smoothly. If the game concept is fun, then it's easier to make it look good later. So for example, if the challenge is tough but fair, in this case, moving through these columns, and you have a little personal challenge, which is to beat your high score, then think, how could you make this more fun? Perhaps at the end of the scene, instead of dying and pausing the whole scene, it recognizes the fact that you have a new high score, and then it allows you the ability to replay. I think I would like to add that to my game. So whenever the variable score is greater than high score, I'm going to add an action, click on text high score, and I'm going to change the color. And I'm going to select a nice bright green. You can pick whichever color you like. Now when we test this, we can see that now when we collide and get a new high score, it shows up as green, which is a visual indicator that it's a new high score. But there's still no way to replay it. So let's add replayability. Down below, add new sub-event, drag that out, add a comment above, and type buttons. We need to add a few buttons into the project. Add a new object, panel sprite button, pick whichever one you prefer, double click on the button, and rename this to button pause. I'm going to leave most of these settings as default, but change the size to 50, and change the initial text to display to pause. I'm going to enable the shadow. Now I'm going to duplicate this and rename to button play again. Open that up and change the initial text to play again. Apply. Drag the pause button out to the bottom of the scene, or wherever makes sense to you. I like to move it to the bottom left. It seems to be out of the way. Now move into the events, and under buttons, we need to check if the pause button is clicked, and we need to change an object variable. So let's add a variable to the button. Double click. At the top, go to variables and add a variable. Name it paused, and move to this section in the middle and change that to a Boolean type and leave it as false. In the scene events, if the button is clicked, we need to select that variable, paused, and set it to toggle. Then add a sub-event and check the status of that Boolean variable. Button variable paused is true. Then we're going to change the time scale. Set it to 0. Now copy and paste this whole event line, and then change if the variable paused is true to false. You can do this by clicking here or by inverting here, and change the timescale to 1. So if the button is not paused, the timescale is 1. Now we can see the pause button is leaving us behind. That is because we did not set it to the UI layer. Out here on the scene, click on the button, and on the left, select UI. Now whenever we click on pause, everything stops. However, it does not unpause. With these conditions in place, make sure that the event line is pulled all the way out so that it's not a child of any other event. We want the pause button to be able to activate whether or not the timescale is set to 0 or 1. Down below, add a new event. For this event, we're going to check if the play button is activated. Select play again is clicked. OK. For the action, type change the scene. Change the scene back to this scene. In this case, I haven't titled it yet, so let's go do that. On the top left, go to Scenes, find your working scene here, and rename. I'll just call it Level 1. Now we need to ensure that the Play Again button spawns as soon as the game is ended. Find the condition where the dog is in collision with barrier or is outside of one of the boundaries. Add an action to create the button at the position somewhere in the center. Let's try camera center X minus the button width and about 100 pixels. Set the Y coordinate to camera center Y minus 75. Now we need to test each method of death. This would be falling out the bottom, flying through the top, and hitting a barrier. The play again button should reset the game, except that the high score should remain the same. As an example of having to play test and debug your game, I just found a problem with this tutorial right here. Up above under the unconditional updates, make sure you drag the change variable score up above the change text. That way, the text for the score receives the most current value for the variable. At this point, we have a highly functional game. We have barriers that spawn at random locations. We have coins that spawn with different values. We have a play again button. We have a permanent high score until the game is restarted. We have a functional pause button, which works when the game is paused or unpaused. And for a super short game, I would say that these mechanics are solid. At this point, we would really be looking to implement the next pillar, which is a little polish goes a long way. While the core mechanics absolutely carry the game, a little bit of polish sprinkled on top really makes all of those mechanics shine through. Now, I don't know if you selected the same sprites that I did, but looking at my own scene, I'm thinking I would like to add a lot more fiery effects to the game. We can do this in a few easy ways. First, go out to the main scene, click on Barrier, Effects, Add 2D Effect, and on the top right, select Glow. Rename the effect Glow. And in the color box, I'm going to set this to an orangey red tone. Then I'm going to select Lava Near, and I'm going to do the same thing. Then, add a new object, Particles Emitter, Sparks, open the sparks, change the color from a brilliant red to a slight orange. Change the radius of the emitter to the width of the scene, 720. Change the particle start size to 100 and the particle end size to 20. Change the minimum rotation speed to -45 and the maximum rotation speed to 45. Apply. Drag the sparks to the bottom center of the scene, actually just below the scene. Rotate that 90 degrees to the left. Make sure that it faces upward, about like so. And click on it, and then select the UI layer on the left. We have sparks flying up from the lava abyss below, and our spike barrier also glows with an ominous red. Now we've added a few visual effects to the game, but polish also includes sound and music, so let's add those to the game. As previously mentioned, I'm going to use a few sound effects that I recorded here at home, and they're available for free on my Patreon page with a free membership. If you don't want to use those, you also have the option to use the free asset store here in GDevelop. So, I will show you how to add sounds into your game. In your events, find the jumping section and add action, sound, play a sound from the device, and I'm selecting the air flap file. Set the volume to 100 and the pitch to random float in range 0.8, 1.2. This will give a nice, subtle variance between flaps. Not that a dog has wings. And test this to make sure that the audio level is correct. Next, scroll down to the coin collection section. If the coin is within distance to the dog, where it says to delete the coin, add action. Play a sound from the device and select the coins file. Again, set the volume to 80. And the pitch to random float in range, 0.8 to 1.2. And again, test. Finally, scroll down to where the button is clicked. For the pause button, add action, play a sound. From the device, click. Volume 100 is fine, and we'll leave the pitch by default this time. Copy that down to the other button as well, but make sure you drag it up above where it says to change the scene, and test. Finally, we need a sound to play whenever the game ends. In this case, I added a sound that might resemble an impact followed by a smoldering effect. Navigate to the death section and add a sound. Hit and smolder. I'm going to set the volume to 90 and I'm going to leave the pitch at default. Okay, all sounds are in order. Now, let's find some music. Now the music we'll pull from the asset store. So at the beginning of the scene, play a music file. Choose from Asset Store. You'll notice there are quite a lot of options. In this case, I'm going to go with this Epic Boss Battle file. I'm going to set the volume way down low and leave the pitch at 1. And I'm going to say repeat the sound so that it loops. Not that I expect I would survive that long in this game. And as a final bit of polish, I noticed that whenever I click the pause button, the dog still jumps. So let's make sure that that does not happen. Navigate to the jumping section, and as a condition, ensure that it says cursor or touch is on the pause button, OK, and then right click and invert. The cursor or touch is not on the pause button, then it can jump. At this point, we've gotten all of the content into the game, and it's quite enjoyable and it's certainly playable. So let's move on to the publishing side of things. On the top left, click on the Project Manager, click Properties, enter your game name and the description, enter your username as an author. You may need a GDevelop account for this. Select your device orientation for mobile, in this case portrait, your self-publishing. Ensure that you uncheck this update resolution during the game to fit the screen or window size. We want it to remain portrait mode. And as I mentioned before, you can monetize this later on if you prefer. You can do this a couple of ways. One is through the built-in AdMob interface right here, in addition to providing it on various stores. Now those are beyond the scope of this video, but there are tutorials available. Now on the branding and loading screen, you can select a background image. I recommend taking a screenshot of your game and adding it right here. Now I've set the background color to match the background color of my game, and down below you can even set the color of your progress bar. Now before you publish, go to the icons and thumbnail under game settings, and choose a file to upload. At the moment, I'm only interested in the GDevelop website as well as desktop, so I'm just going to upload to those two. Once you're ready to publish your game, go up to this globe, click Share. You have multiple options here, depending on the platform. Start with uploading to a browser. In this case, I'm going to upload to the GDevelop website. And here you can edit your game information. While here in the editor, I called it My First Game, on the website I'm going to call it Flappy Fire Dog. And you can select your genres here. And to ensure people can see your game, make it discoverable. Edit your description, and edit the game name in the URL. Down below, make sure that the orientation is portrait. In this case, it's playable from keyboard and on mobile. Save project and publish. And I'm uploading this in real time, so I hope it goes well. At this point, you have a QR code. So just get your phone and grab that. And there's the game. By the way, don't forget to playtest your game on mobile. Now I did this before the tutorial, but in the future you'd want to do this as you go along. Now on the website, my game is published and available to the public. You'll notice that you can share the game, and you can even add a donate link. Now if the prospect of uploading a game makes you nervous, you're not alone. It takes a lot of nerves to put yourself out there. And that actually brings us to pillar number 10, which is don't be afraid to fail. Failure is a part of the learning process. If a project isn't working out, you can analyze it, learn from it, and move forward. There is no stopping. Now as a bonus, I'm going to give you 2 more pillars back to back. So here we go. Pillar number 11. Balance your time between learning and actually putting what you learned into practice, which is essentially what we just did. Practical application helps reinforce what you learn. And finally, pillar number 12. Take breaks and avoid burnout. Game development can be demanding. In this way, you can stay motivated and productive. And any developer will tell you, myself included, that we solve bugs away from the keyboard. The brain will continue to solve problems, so trust it. And finally, congratulations on making it this far. If you followed the tutorial, then you now have published your very own game. And so many games never see the light of day, but yours now has. And you should be proud. And building on everything that you've just learned, your next game will be even better. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I hope that you have fewer bugs than I do. Thanks.